Hello everyone, welcome back to Chinmui's Biology channel, and today we are here with a brand new episode of friction. So I hope you have already gone through the previous part of friction, and if you have not gone through that, I'll be putting the link in the description box. So let's get started with a very interesting episode. Please don't skip in the middle and stay tuned till the end. So let's get started. So let us do a quick revision of the previous class. So what is friction? So friction is the force that opposes the motion when two surfaces in contact move or tend to move with respect to each other. So suppose this is the road and this is a car or a vehicle tire. They are moving on, these two surfaces are in contact with each other and they are trying to move with respect to each other. So the opposing force is the friction. Okay, so this is what is friction. We have studied in the previous class. So what are the causes of friction? The force of friction is basically caused by interlocking of the irregularities between the two surfaces. Okay, there are irregularities in both the surfaces, like suppose this is a tire and this is the road. So the interlocking of the irregularities between the two surfaces that are in contact. When the sufficient force is applied, the interlock breaks and the body moves. Suppose there are irregularities on the road as well as there are irregularities on the tire, which we are not able to see visually, but when these force is sufficient enough to break this interlocking force between the two surfaces, then only this body will move. So this is same in case when we are walking on a surface. This will be same. So our leg is also having irregularities, the road is also having irregularities. So when we are overcoming this, then only we will be able to move. Okay. Now, what are the effects of friction? So, friction, we have told just now, it opposes motion. You can see this is the frictional force and this is the shear reaction force. When it is the opposing force, we are overcoming that, then only the body will move. Now, friction results in wear and tear of the surfaces in contact. Here you can see after wearing these shoes for a long time, the soles have got torn. So, the friction is the actually the for that only the wear and tear of soles or surfaces has happened. Now friction produces heat. When you are rubbing both your palm together, you will feel a sensation of heat in your palm. So when it's winter season, when you are feeling cold, when your hands get cold, you just rub your hands together and you will get a sensation of heat. That is, friction produces heat. Now we will move to today's topic, what we are going to deal with today. So we stopped in the previous class that friction is a necessary evil. So that we will elaborate today. So stay tuned with me, don't skip in between. So we will be discussing about many interesting topics. So now let us discuss that friction is a necessary evil about that. So what does this mean? That friction is necessary, that something which is necessary but it is not desired. Actually, it is having many evil effects also. So there are many advantages as well as disadvantages of this friction. So what are they? So let us recall how some of your experiences, like when you are holding a kulhar or earthen pot or a glass tumbler. Suppose if the surface of the tumbler is very greasy, it is having a thin layer of oil on it, what will happen? It will slip off from your hand. Okay. So if friction is not there, it will slip off, it will break, whether it is a glass pot or a glass container or a kulhar, something like that, or a glass tumbler, it will fall. Now again you think while you are walking on a wet muddy track, what will happen? Now or a wet marble floor, there is a tendency of falling down, right? So can you imagine being able to walk at all if there were no friction? No, we can't imagine. So these are two surfaces. What are the irregularities there? So one force should overcome that to move other objects. So that is what is frictional force, right? So we have studied it earlier. So you could not write with a pen or a pencil even if there were no friction. When your teacher is writing with chalk on the blackboard, its rough surface rubs off some chalk particles which sticks to the blackboard, right? So when she is writing, so whatever she is writing on the board, it is due to the actually due to the chalk and the board friction, and that is why it is getting
stuck, chalk particles are getting stuck on the blackboard, and that is how she is writing. So could it happen if there were no friction between the chalk and the board? No, it can't happen like that. So if an object started moving, it would never stop if there were no friction. Had there been no friction between the tires of the automobiles and the road, they could not have been started or stopped. Okay, so every object which is moving, which is stopping, there should be a frictional force. So you could not fix a nail on the wall also if, or tie a knot. So friction is very important, it is necessary. Now, without friction, a building could not be constructed. So, these are the necessities or advantages we can say. On the other hand, friction, how we can describe that friction is an evil, because it wears out the materials, whether they are screws, ball bearings, or soles of shoes. So, when you are wearing a shoe for a very long time, you can see the soles of the shoe will be worn out. Okay, it will be destroyed. So, like that, ball bearings which are present where in the fans, in the bicycles. So, these ball bearings, the soles, the screws, they are worn, they are generally, they wear out. Okay, yeah, there are other examples as well, like we can, when you are walking over the footbridges in railway stations or any subway and all, you will see that the steps have worn out after 5-10 years, because like daily lakhs and lakhs of people are traveling through these footbridges. So there is a frictional force between the foot and the stone, or the whatever material the foot bridges are made, wooden, whatever material it is made up of. So the frictional force is wearing out the steps. Okay, so that is also an evil thing, that is destroying the foot bridges, over bridges. Now friction can also produce heat, that is another thing. Vigorously, if you are rubbing your palms together for a few minutes, you will see heat is produced. How do you feel if we can say, now, how when you strike a matchstick against a rough surface, what is happening there? Then we can say that it catches fire. Okay, so you might have observed that a jar or a mixer becomes hot when it is run, that is, it is producing heat. In fact, when a machine is operated, heat is generated, which causes much wastage of energy. So this is another drawback or disadvantage, that is, energy is being wasted due to the presence of friction. If friction was not there, then much of the energy would have been saved. So we shall discuss the ways of minimizing friction in the following section. So we will be discussing about increasing and decreasing friction in the next next slide. So please stay updated with all what I am teaching throughout the lesson. Don't skip in between. So in the next slide, we will be learning about the increasing and reducing friction.
So what are the factors affecting friction? First is the nature of the surface. So how does the nature of the surface affect? So first we can say that if there is a rough surface, the irregularities are more than a smooth surface. So this suggests that a rough surface will show a greater resistance. So rough surface will show greater resistance, and the greater will be the friction. So rough surface, the friction will be greater. Okay, so friction will be more than a smooth surface. Is it clear? Now, the second comes the weight of an object. So, let us perform an activity to understand what we can do. We can just place a heavy object on a given surface and try to pull it against the in a rough surface. What we'll do, we will see that a heavy object is difficult to pull, and a lighter object is easier to pull. Okay, so it is easier to pull. Why? Because the greater resistance will be given in case of a heavy object, and when you are finding difficulty in moving the heavier object, it means that they are affecting your friction, they are increasing your friction. So weight is obviously a main factor which affects friction. So more the weight, more will be the frictional force. So a heavier object or a heavier material is difficult to drag or pull or push than a lighter object. So friction will be more. Now third comes the area of contact. So we can say that we know that however is the area of contact between the two bodies. So more the area of more the mass, more the intensity of interlocking, and then more the friction will be. So the level of interlocking between the two surfaces, it decides the amount of friction between the two surfaces. So if the surface of area or the contact area is more part will be interlocked, and more force will be required to overcome this interlocking situation. So more the area of contact, greater will be the friction. So this is also directly proportional. Now we will move on to types of friction, as we have already spoken of two types, that is static friction, and we have spoken about the limiting friction in the previous class. Now we will be speaking about the sliding friction, fluid friction, and the rolling friction. Let's get to the point. So this too we have already studied. Just a quick revision of types of friction. So what is static friction? The friction acting between the two surfaces which are in contact and placed at rest is the static friction. It tends to keep the object at rest. Okay, so they are not moving, they are keeping them at rest itself. Now the second one is the limiting force. So what is the limiting force? When the force applied on a stationary object is gradually increased, a stage comes when the object just starts moving. So the maximum force required to make the object move on the surface of the other object is the limiting friction. So suppose this is a surface, on that you are trying to pull or push this object. So the maximum force you are increasing to make this object just move. So just move is that the limiting friction. So maximum force required to just move the object from the surface is the limiting friction. Okay, so this is the limiting friction. So now we will move on to the sliding, rolling, and fluid friction.
Now we all know that wheels reduce the friction. So you must have seen that certain luggage is fitted with rollers. So a child can also pull this luggage. You can also pull big luggages which are being fixed with rollers. So why it is so? So here we will do one experiment. So you are taking few pencils here. You are just placing them parallelly on a table, and on that top of that you are placing a book. Now you try to move it. You will see the book is moving faster. Do you think the resistance to the motion of the book has been reduced? Have you seen a heavy machinery being moved by placing logs under it? So these are all your field experience. So when you are moving out, you can see where the construction work is going on. They are using several logs to move the heavy machinery or heavy objects so that it can be moved easier, so that the friction is reduced. So how is it happening? So when one body rolls over the surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is called the rolling friction. So the resistance to its motion, it is called the rolling friction. So rolling reduces friction. It is always easier to roll than to slide a body over another. So when a body is moving or rolling over the surface of another body, the resistance of motion is the rolling friction. So thus that is the reason it is convenient to pull a luggage fitted with rollers. Okay, is it clear? So whenever you are pulling a trolley, a luggage fitted with rollers, it is much easier for you. Can you now understand why wheel is said to be one of the greatest inventions of mankind? Yeah, it makes our life very easy. Now, since rolling is similar to that of, it's actually smaller, and then that is called sliding friction as well. So sliding is replaced in most machine by rolling by the use of ball bearings. Okay, common examples are used of ball bearings between the hubs and the axles of the ceiling fans and bicycles. So ball bearings are used in the ceiling fans as well as the bicycles as well to reduce the friction and to create a sliding friction. You can see these are the ball bearings which are being used in the cycle, as well as they are also used in the fan. Okay, so these are the ball bearings. So you can see these are the ball bearings which can be used in the bicycles as well as the fans. Now we will move on to another kind of friction, that is called fluid friction. So what is it? What is fluid friction? Now you know that when very air is very light and thin, it exerts the force on objects moving through it, right? Similarly, water and other liquids, they exert force of friction when objects move through them. In science, the common name of gases and liquids, we can together tell them that they are fluids. Okay, so we can say that fluids exert a force of friction on the objects in motion through them. Is it clear to all of you? Now, when water or air is passing through an object, they are also creating friction. So that is called fluid friction. So the frictional force exerted by fluids is also called drag. The frictional force on an object in the fluid depends on its speed with respect to the fluid. Okay, so with respect to the fluid, the frictional force is depending. The frictional force also depends on the shape of the object and the nature of the object. So we are taking here the liquid as well as the gases both as we can say that both the liquid and the gases they are considered as fluid here. So it is obvious that when objects move through fluids, they have to overcome the friction acting on them and they lose certain energy. So efforts are therefore made to minimize the friction. So objects are they are having very special shape. So how you can tell, like birds, they are having a definite structure of a body. Fishes, they have to move in fluids all the time. So their body shapes have evolved to that only, which would make them lose less energy in overcoming the friction. So this you will get to know that when you are going for swimming classes, if you are going for swimming classes, how much difficult it is for us to make us swim through that fluid or through liquid. You will every time feel the frictional force. But for a fish to swim, it is much easier. And for a bird to fly in air, it is also cutting the air or the fluid. It is also exerting a frictional force, so that is easier for them because of their body shape. So look carefully at the shape of an aeroplane as well. It is shaped like the body of a bird. Do you find any similarity between its shape and that of a bird? In fact, all vehicles are designed to have shapes which reduce fluid friction. Here you can see the similarity between a body of an aeroplane and that of a bird. Now we will see how and why we should increase and decrease the frictional force. So let us move on to that now. So now we will discuss about how we can increase and reduce the friction. So as you know, that in the previous section we have already told that friction is desirable in some situations, that it is required in some situations, whereas it is not required in some situations. So have you ever thought by that why the sole of your shoe is grooved? It is done to provide the shoes better grip on the floor. See, you are seeing this sole of the shoes which is having grooves so that you can move safely and you'll not slip over the surfaces. Okay. So the treaded tires of cars, trucks and bulldozers. So these are the treaded tires which will provide better grip with the ground, right? So we can say that we deliberately try to increase the friction by using brake pads in the brake system of bicycles and any other automobiles like car, truck, buses and all. So when you are riding a bicycle, the brake pads do not touch the wheels, but you press the brake lever. These pads arrest the motion of the rim due to friction. Okay, so the wheel stops moving, and you might see that kabaddi players also rub their hands with soil before gripping the opponent so that their hands will not slip off from the opponent's hands. So they will have a great grip. Okay, the gymnasts also apply some coarse substance on their hands to increase the friction. So this is how we can increase the friction. We are applying something in our gymnasts are applying something in our hands. We are wearing shoes with proper grippers. We are using tires with the treaders and all. So this is how we can use we can increase the friction, right? So weightlifters also, you can see they apply some powders on their hand before lifting the weight so that it will increase the friction and they will have a firm grip. Okay, So when we are mountaineers and all, when we are wearing shoes, we will have some spikes in our shoes, okay, like thorns. Like what these spikes will do, they will increase the grip of the shoes when they are moving on the hills or mountains. Okay, so when a ground is becoming slippery after rain, so we will spread some sand on it to reduce that slipperiness and to increase the friction. So there are many such examples. I have told you about the brakes applied by the cycles and the automobiles and all. So in the bathroom also, the tiles of the bathroom are designed with small grooves in them. Such design increases the friction and there is a less chance of slipping in the floor. So these are how we can increase, with several steps, they increase the friction in certain substances. So now in certain other cases, we are trying to decrease the friction, like we are sprinkling fine powder on the carom board so that we want to make it smooth and the friction is reduced, so that the carom board, the playing will be smooth and easy. Okay, so you might have noticed that when a few drops of oil are poured on the hinges of the door will move smoothly. That will not make sound, that will not be difficult to move. So a bicycle or a motor mechanic uses grease between the moving parts of these machines as well. So these are the ways to increase frictions and these are the ways to reduce friction, right? So when oil and grease and graphite is applied between the moving part of a machine, a thin layer is formed there and moving surfaces that do not directly rub against each other. So there, between two parts of a machine, if you are putting a drop of oil and these two machine parts, when they are coming near to each other, they are not rubbing each other and they have less friction. Okay, so they'll do not rub against each other. So interlocking irregularities is avoided to great extent in such cases and the movement becomes very smooth. You will have a sound free and a smooth movement. So these substances which reduce the friction are called lubricants. Okay, now in some machines it may not be advisable to use oil as lubricant because as air cushion between the moving parts is used to reduce the frictions. Okay, so in certain cases you are using lubricant, but in other cases the air cushion is there which is helping to reduce the friction and to help between the moving parts to reduce the friction. Okay, so this is all about the increasing and reducing friction in our daily lives, in our daily activities, how we can conduct. So this is all about your friction lesson. I've completed it in 2 different episodes. Hope you have understood in full. If you are having still any doubts, any queries, please do write in my comment box and ask me your question so that I can get back to you, and don't skip in between. Please stay tuned through all the episodes and all the full lessons. You will get the topic clear, and the next video I'll be discussing on sound. So stay tuned, stay updated with all the lessons. Thank you. Thanks a lot for watching.